My fiancé looked me dead in the eye and said, "Don't call me your future husband. Not in public. Not yet." I nodded. I even smiled. And that night, while he slept beside me like nothing had happened, I sat in the dark on my laptop and quietly deleted my own name from every single guest list he had built for his campaign events. Every fundraiser, every meet and greet, every photo op for the next 6 weeks. Gone. Like I'd never existed. 2 days later, he strolled into a donor lunch feeling untouchable and froze the second he saw what was sitting on his chair. Stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why I did it and exactly what was inside that envelope. Let me back up, because you need to understand who I actually am before you understand what I did. My name is Elena Ashcombe. I'm 29 years old, and for most of my adult life, I have made myself as small and unremarkable as possible on purpose. I drive a 9-year-old Honda with a dented bumper. I buy my clothes at the same 3 stores everyone else does. I don't wear jewelry that says anything about who I am, because who I am is the granddaughter of Harrison Ashcombe, the man who built half the commercial real estate in this city and used to have cabinet secretaries return his calls within the hour. My family doesn't do flash. We do quiet. My parents taught economics at a state university for 20 years before my grandfather finally convinced them to come run parts of the family trust. Nobody who met them at a school function ever guessed what they were sitting on. That's how we were raised. Never let people treat you differently because of the name, because the name changes everything the second it comes out, and you stop being a person and start being a resource. I lived by that rule for 29 years, and it cost me more than I ever expected. I met Marcus at a fundraiser 8 months before that night with the envelope. He was running for city council at the time. Young, sharp-jawed, the kind of candidate who looks incredible on a campaign poster and somehow always has the perfect 30-second answer for reporters. I was there representing my family's foundation, writing a check for the venue, staying in the background the way I always do. He found me first. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he said, holding 2 glasses of wine like he already knew I'd take one. "Networking isn't really my thing." "So what is your thing?" "Housing policy. Displacement prevention, mostly. I wrote my graduate thesis on it." His whole face changed, genuinely lit up. "Wait, seriously? Have you read the Delacroix report on eviction patterns in this city?" We talked for 2 hours straight. He was smart. He knew his policy cold, not just the talking points. He cared, or seemed to, about the right things. When he asked for my number at the end of the night, I gave it to him without hesitation. I want you to remember that feeling, because it matters for what comes later. I didn't fall for a man. I fell for a vision of a man who cared about the same things I did. And I mistook that vision for the real thing for 8 months. Our first date was at a noodle shop near the university. He insisted on splitting the bill, told me he didn't believe in outdated gender roles, that a woman shouldn't have to feel indebted just because a man picked up a check. I respected that. I actually respected that a lot at the time. By month 3, he was meeting my parents, who he believed were retired professors, because that was, technically, true. He never asked what came after retirement. I never told him. Operational security, my grandfather always called it. Keep your real life sealed off until you're sure someone deserves to see it. By month 6, Marcus had jumped from city council to a full mayoral run. That's an aggressive leap, and everybody around him knew it. But his numbers with younger voters were strong, and progressive donors were circling. And I loved him. So when he asked for help, I said yes without blinking. He needed money. Mayoral campaigns in a city this size don't run cheap, and I quietly set up a political action committee through my family's foundation. Completely legal, completely on the books, just structured so the checks came from the Ashcombe Foundation, without anyone connecting the name to me specifically. Marcus thought the foundation simply liked his platform. He never once considered that I was the foundation. I found him campaign headquarters, 20,000 square feet in a prime downtown corridor, and he thought he'd landed some incredible deal from a sympathetic landlord. He had no idea my family's trust owned the entire building. I made calls. I connected him to consultants, to strategists, to donors who mattered. He thought I was just unusually well connected for a policy volunteer. He never once suspected I was the connection. And I told myself this was fine, that I was simply supporting a man whose vision I believed in. But underneath all of that convenient reasoning was a much simpler, much more humiliating truth. I was in love, and I was terrified that if he ever found out what I actually had, he'd stop loving the version of me that had nothing. Classic mistake. I know that now. The first crack showed up in March. We were alone at his campaign office, late at night. and he was staring at polling numbers like they might rearrange themselves if he glared hard enough. I need a bigger ad buy, he said, but we're maxed out on donors. There might be other options, I offered carefully. I've called everyone I know. Nobody wants to commit more until they see movement. Then he looked up at me, really looked like he was doing math. What about you? You could help, right? With what exactly? You're in policy consulting. What do you even make? 60 grand a year. This campaign is bleeding me dry, Elena. I never told him I made $60,000 a year. I never told him I was in policy consulting as some kind of salaried employee. He'd built that story on his own, based on my beat-up car, my thrift store blazers, my refusal to eat anywhere with cloth napkins. And I had let him keep believing it, because some small, prideful part of me wanted so badly to be loved without the money attached. I'll figure something out, I told him. That night, I quietly wired another $200,000 into the super PAC through 3 layers of intermediary organizations. Perfectly legal, perfectly invisible. His ad buy ran the following week. He never asked where the money came from. Not once. The second crack came in May at $1,000 a plate donor dinner. I'd bought an entire table, 8 seats, and filled it with family friends who'd write checks purely as a favor to me. Marcus worked that room like it was second nature, remembering names, laughing at the right moments. But when he reached our table, something in his posture shifted. He introduced me to a major real estate donor, a man named Whitmore. "This is Elena," Marcus said, his hand landing on my shoulder like I was a piece of office furniture. "She's been such a great supporter. Helps out with policy research. Very detail-oriented. Detail-oriented. Like I ran his spreadsheets for him." Whitmore glanced at me. "You work for the campaign?" "I volunteer," Marcus answered for me, smiling wide. "Elena does a lot of the unglamorous stuff nobody else wants to touch." The table laughed politely. I forced a smile that felt like glass in my mouth. Later that night, back at his apartment, I brought it up. "Why did you introduce me like that?" "Like what?" "Like I'm your intern." "Elena, you're being sensitive. I was complimenting your work ethic. You made it sound like that's all I am to you." "You're my fiancée," he said, exasperated, "and also my policy volunteer. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. I didn't introduce you as my fiancée because donors need to see me as serious, independent, not some guy who brings his girlfriend to work events. We're engaged. That's not a small detail, Marcus. That's personal, and this was business." He kissed my cheek like the conversation was over and went to bed. I sat on his couch for 2 hours trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Something in my chest had already gone cold, even if I refused to admit it yet. The third crack came in July. His numbers were climbing. Interviews, magazine profiles, podcast appearances, the works. One glossy feature in a city lifestyle magazine did an entire day in the life spread. Pictures of his apartment, his jogging route, his campaign office. I wasn't in a single photo. The article specifically noted he was laser-focused on his career, with no interest in romantic distractions at this stage. When I asked him about it, he shrugged like it was obvious. "The photographer wanted you in a few shots." I said no. "Why?" "Because it raises questions. People start asking who you are, what you do, how we met, how we're funded. And frankly, Elena, your story isn't compelling enough to help the narrative." My hands went cold. "I'm your fiancé, and that's exactly why I'm protecting you from scrutiny. If people start digging into your background, your finances, your connections, that opens doors I can't afford to open right now." I nearly told him everything, right there in that kitchen. Nearly said the words, "I am the foundation. I am the landlord. I am the reason your campaign exists at all." But something, pride, maybe, or the last flicker of hope that he'd choose me without needing the number attached, stopped me. "Forget it," I said instead. He studied me for a second. "You've been stressed. Why don't you take some time off from volunteering? I'll handle things." Take time off from the campaign I had personally funded into existence. He didn't notice when I did. The fourth crack, the one I should have listened to, came in August, when his campaign manager quit with almost no notice. Marcus panicked and hired an outside consultant named Patricia, 20 years of political experience, sharp as a blade. In one of the first strategy meetings, with me sitting quietly in the corner, Patricia flipped through the building lease and frowned. "Who's your landlord?" she asked Marcus. "Some trust. Ashcombe Holdings, I think." Patricia's eyebrows went up. Ashcombe Holdings is one of the biggest private development firms on the East Coast. They don't hand out sweetheart deals to political campaigns for fun. Do you know why they're doing this? "Maybe they like my housing platform," Marcus said. Patricia looked deeply unconvinced. I sat in that corner, invisible, and listened to two people discuss my own family's company like it was some unsolvable riddle. Then came the engagement party. It was his idea, not mine. We need to formalize things publicly, he told me in September. Show donors I'm stable, ready for real leadership. I thought you wanted our relationship private. That was before I was the frontrunner. Now people want to see the whole package. The whole package. Me, apparently, functioning as set dressing. We spent 2 weeks planning. He invited 300 people, donors, journalists, local officials. I invited exactly 0. When he asked why my family wasn't coming, I told him they were low-key and this wasn't their scene. The truth was simpler. I couldn't risk my grandfather showing up and accidentally detonating the secret I'd been protecting for 8 months. I was still hoping, after everything, that Marcus would choose to see me before he ever found out what I had. The party was booked at one of the city's grandest historic ballrooms. His choice, of course, for the photo backdrop. The bill came to $23,000, which I quietly paid through a shell entity. He thought a donor had covered it as a gift. The night of the party, I wore a deep green dress I actually loved. He was already there, mid-interview with 2 reporters, looking radiant in a way that used to make my chest ache with pride. When he spotted me, his smile flickered, performative, camera ready, and he simply said, "You made it. Go mingle. I need to finish this." So I mingled. Talked to donors I had personally recruited, staff I had personally hired, consultants I had personally connected him with. Not one of them knew who I actually was. At 7 o'clock, he took the stage. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began. "This campaign has been incredible, and it's because of people like you. People who believe in a better future for this city." Applause. I also want to acknowledge someone very special. My dear friend, Elena, who has been such a wonderful supporter. Dear friend, not fiancé, not partner, friend. The room clapped politely, the way you clap for the caterer. Elena's helped with policy research, volunteer coordination, all the unglamorous work that keeps a campaign running, he continued. She's been a real asset to the team. An asset? I looked down at the ring on my finger, 3 months' worth of an ordinary person's salary, though that math meant nothing to a family like mine, and realized he hadn't mentioned our engagement once. Not once, at our own engagement party. Afterward, I found him in a side hallway. "You called me your friend," I said. "Great event, right? You introduced me as your dear friend, not your fiancé." He blinked, genuinely surprised I'd noticed. "Oh, right. I thought about it, but it felt too personal for a donor event. This is our engagement party, Marcus. You invited 300 people to celebrate our engagement and never once said the word engaged." His expression hardened instantly. "Don't do this tonight. Don't make everything about you. This is supposed to be about us. It would be, if you'd done anything worth acknowledging publicly." Those words landed like a slap. "Excuse me. Look, I appreciate everything you do. I really do. But let's be honest. You're a volunteer. A policy researcher. You're not a major donor. You're not a political operative. You're not someone these people need to know by name. I have to be smart about optics. If I introduce you as my fiancé, people start asking what you do, how much you make, whether I'm using you for access. I can't afford those questions right now. So you're hiding me. I'm protecting both of us. I'm your fiancé, and that's supposed to be something to be proud of." He softened his voice like he was talking me down from a ledge. "It is. But tonight, can you just let me have this moment?" I looked at him, really looked, and saw a stranger wearing a face I used to love. "Sure," I said quietly. "Have your moment." I walked back into the ballroom, and that's when I saw it. A black leather envelope, gold embossed lettering, sitting neatly on my chair. I already knew, somehow, before I even opened it, that it was going to be cruel. Inside was a single heavy card, a formal thank you note for my generous support of Marcus Calloway's mayoral campaign, noting my contribution, nearly $850,000, with a promise of continued patronage. And beneath it, in his own handwriting, a private joke meant just for me. "You've been such a good little donor. Don't worry, I'll find someone worthy of standing beside me." The room went quiet, waiting to watch me fall apart. Instead, I smiled. "You're right," I said, loud enough to carry across 300 people. "You do need someone worthy." And I walked out. Behind me, I heard him calling my name in that sweet, concerned, camera-ready voice he saved for public consumption. I didn't stop. Sitting alone in my car in the parking garage, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Garrett Morrison, my family's attorney for over 2 decades, a former federal prosecutor who now ran his own firm. Garrett, it's Elena. Execute the full extraction on Marcus Calloway. Everything tonight. Understood, he said, without a hint of surprise. The super PAC funding? Terminated before midnight. The headquarters lease, his name's on it, but the trust owns the building. Start eviction proceedings. Give him the legal minimum notice, not a day more. Staff salaries run through the Calloway Campaign Fund, which the foundation funds entirely. Cut every transfer. And the media consultants? Void every contract. Breach of moral character clause. I'll send the documentation tonight. The second call was to my cousin, Dr. Naomi Ashcombe, chief of staff at the city's largest university hospital, who had been begging me for 2 years to finally take a seat on her board. Naomi, I'm ready to accept that board position. But there's something about one of your hospital's donors you need to hear first. The third call was to my grandfather, Harrison Ashcombe III, former Secretary of Commerce, current chairman of the family holding company, the kind of man who still had a sitting senator's direct line memorized. Elena, he said warmly, how was the party? It's over. Silence. Then, what happened? He called me his dear friend in front of 300 people, then made a joke about how much money I'd given his campaign. That boy has no idea who you are, does he? No, sir. Good. Keep it that way until tomorrow. Then burn his entire house down. Legally, of course. Already started. He laughed, sharp, satisfied. That's my granddaughter. I drove home through the rain that night and felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not grief. Just clarity. Cold, clean clarity. The next morning my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts. Voicemails. Elena, what happened? The account's frozen. The headquarters is being evicted. The consultants are pulling out. Call me. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I drove to see Naomi. That afternoon, the hospital's press office quietly released a small announcement. We are pleased to welcome Elena Ashcombe to our board of directors. Ms. Ashcombe serves as managing director of the Ashcombe Foundation and brings extensive experience in urban development and philanthropic strategy. It was a small item, buried among a dozen other hospital press releases. But in a city this size, small announcements travel fast when they land in the right inboxes. By 5 that evening, 3 journalists had called me directly. By 6, someone had connected Elena Ashcombe to Ashcombe Holdings. By 7, someone had connected Ashcombe Holdings to Marcus Calloway's campaign headquarters lease. By 8, the story broke wide open. Mayoral frontrunner loses major financial backing after personal dispute. The article confirmed the foundation had contributed nearly $850,000 through a super PAC, that its heiress had recently been engaged to the candidate, and that the engagement had reportedly ended. Marcus called 17 times that night. I let every single one go to voicemail. Day 2 brought the real collapse. His campaign put out a statement calling the funding withdrawal an unethical abuse of personal leverage. It was the wrong move, and he didn't even see it coming. Garrett's counter-statement landed within the hour. The foundation had withdrawn support due to concerns about Mr. Calloway's character and integrity, citing a pattern of behavior inconsistent with our values. 3 more major donors pulled out that same afternoon. By evening, Patricia, his own campaign manager, resigned publicly, stating plainly that she couldn't continue working for a candidate who misrepresented his relationships and funding sources to the public. His polling dropped 12 points in 3 days. And somehow, he still didn't understand why. Then came the lunch. Garrett called me that morning with a warning. Marcus is holding a small donor appreciation event today. He's planning to give a speech about you. He's going to play the victim. Say you're the vindictive ex trying to sabotage his campaign because he wouldn't let you control him. He's going to lie in public. He's going to try to make it sound like a story about a woman crushing an ambitious man's dream. I'd get in that room if I were you. I wore the Navy suit my grandfather always told me to save for serious occasions. Garrett met me there with David, a former federal prosecutor now on our legal team, holding a black leather folder full of receipts, wire transfers, lease documents, and time-stamped communications. Everything notarized, everything airtight. I walked into a private dining room mid-toast. Conversation stopped instantly. Marcus froze when he saw me, but recovered fast, flashing his practiced smile. Elena, what a surprise. I didn't know you were coming. I wasn't invited. I thought I should hear this for myself. He turned back to his donors, though his confidence had visibly cracked. At noon, he stood to speak. These past few days have been difficult, he began. As some of you know, my former fiancée withdrew nearly $1 million in funding after I chose to keep my personal life separate from my campaign. after I refused to let her control my public image. Sympathetic murmurs rippled through the room. This is what women in relationships with powerful men sometimes do when they can't accept an independent partner. He was building himself into a martyr in real time. He evicted my headquarters, cut off my consultants, destroyed relationships I'd spent months building, all because I wouldn't let him control the narrative. Wait, I have to correct myself here, because in his version, of course, I was cast as the aggressor. All because I wouldn't be controlled, he said, looking directly at me. If you're here to intimidate me, Elena, it won't work. I'm not afraid of you or your family's money. The room erupted in applause. I let it settle. Then I stood. May I respond? He blinked. This isn't really a debate format. It's not a debate. It's a clarification. I walked to the front of the room, and Garrett handed me the folder. My name is Elena Ashcombe. Most of you have never heard that name, because I've spent my whole life making sure of it. For 8 months, I supported Marcus's campaign, not just financially, but structurally. I leased him his headquarters through my family's trust. I held up the lease. Below market rate. $14,000 a month for a space worth nearly 3 times that. I pulled out the next document. Here's the wire transfer for the initial super PAC funding. $200,000, sent in February. Here's every consultant contract, media strategy, digital advertising, opposition research, all funded through the Ashcombe Foundation, all at my direction. The room had gone completely silent. He told you I withdrew support to punish him for maintaining his independence. That's not what happened. I pulled up a photo on my phone. This is what was waiting on my chair at our own engagement party. A party he invited 300 people to, and never once told the room we were engaged. I read the note aloud. The generous donor, line, the private joke about finding someone worthy. Marcus's face had gone completely white. He called me his dear friend that night, in front of everyone, because acknowledging our relationship publicly might have made him look less impressive to his donors. He told me my story wasn't interesting enough to help his campaign, that I should stay in the background where I belonged. I turned to face him directly. You're entitled to think whatever you want about me. You are not entitled to my money, my family's name, or my continued silence while you humiliate me in front of strangers. I held up one final page. This is a statement from your own former campaign manager, who resigned because, and I'm quoting her directly, you, quote, systematically misrepresented the sources and extent of your campaign funding, creating serious ethical concerns about transparency with voters. I set the folder down on the table. So yes, I withdrew my family's support. Not because Marcus refused to be controlled, but because he was dishonest. With his donors, with his voters, with me. Silence. Then, from the back of the room, a single set of hands started clapping. Then a few more. I walked out. He called after me. Elena, wait, please, let me explain, but I didn't stop. You've had 8 months to explain, I said without turning around. To see me. To introduce me as your fiancé instead of your intern. You made your choice. I made a mistake. You made a lot of mistakes. But the biggest one was thinking I'd stay invisible forever. The media storm lasted a full week. He gave 3 separate interviews trying to salvage himself, and each one made it worse, calling me controlling, vindictive, suggesting my family was trying to buy political influence. Every single accusation was quietly and thoroughly disproven by Garrett's team. Bank records showing every transaction was voluntary. Text messages proving he'd asked for and received every dollar of help I'd given him. By day 5, his remaining donors had abandoned him entirely. By day 7, his closest opponent had pulled 23 points ahead. By day 10, he dropped out of the race altogether, releasing a brief statement about how the campaign had become about his personal life rather than his vision. With no apology, no acknowledgement of the truth, nothing. He simply disappeared from public view. 3 months later, I sat with my grandfather in his study while he poured 2 glasses of bourbon. You handled that better than I would have at your age, he said. I made one mistake. Only one, he agreed. You trusted someone who hadn't earned it yet. I loved him. Love and trust aren't the same thing, Elena. Love is what you feel. Trust is what you build, brick by brick, over time. He never built anything with you. He just took what you gave him. He handed me the glass. Your grandmother had more money than I did when we married. Old shipping family. She could have made me feel small every single day of our marriage. She never did. Not once. Because she understood marriage is a partnership, not a performance. Marcus made you smaller every day, and you let him, because you thought that's what love required. I wanted him to see me. He did see you, my grandfather said gently. He saw an opportunity he could use without ever having to acknowledge it. That's not love. That's exploitation, dressed up in a nice suit. He took a slow sip. Your grandmother used to say the truest test of anyone's character is how they treat people they think can't help them. Marcus thought you could only help him by staying invisible. So that's exactly how he treated you. What now? I asked. Now you focus on the foundation. Do the policy work you actually care about, instead of funding other people's campaigns and hoping they remember your name. He smiled. Find someone who wants you standing beside them in the photo. Not in front of you. Not behind you. Beside you. Did you find that? I married her. 53 years and counting. Best decision I ever made. 6 months after that engagement party, a plain envelope arrived with no return address. Inside, a single handwritten page. Elena, I know I don't deserve a response, and I probably don't deserve to write this at all, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I've spent months in therapy trying to understand why I treated you the way I did. My therapist says it's about control, about insecurity, about a fear that if people knew I'd had help, they'd think I hadn't earned any of it. None of that excuses what I did. You gave me everything. Your money, your time, your trust, your love, and I repaid you by making you invisible. I destroyed us. I destroyed my own campaign. I destroyed any chance of becoming the leader I claimed I wanted to be. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that I see you now. I saw you then too. If I'm honest, I just couldn't admit how much I needed you, because needing you made me feel weak. I was wrong. You were never the one who needed to disappear. I was. Take care of yourself. You deserve someone who sees you from the very beginning. I read it twice, folded it carefully, and put it in a drawer, not because I wanted to forgive him, but because it was proof that, eventually, the truth had landed exactly where it needed to. A year later, I met someone new at a housing policy conference. Her name was Daniela, an urban planner with strong opinions and an even stronger handshake. When she asked about my work, I told her the whole truth without flinching. I run my family's foundation. Affordable housing mostly. The Ashcombe Foundation. Her eyes widened. Wait, that Ashcombe? I've been trying to get a meeting with your team for 3 months. Your housing model is genuinely brilliant. We talked for 2 hours about policy, about vision, about what our city could actually become if it were built right. On our third date, I told her the whole story about Marcus. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she simply said, "That must have been incredibly painful." It was. Do you regret walking away? No. I regret waiting so long to do it. She smiled. Good. Because I need you to know something up front. I don't date invisible people. If we do this, I'm going to brag about you constantly. Obnoxiously, probably. Is that okay? I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Yeah, I said. That's more than okay. If this story hit you the way it hit me writing it, the slow build of red flags, the moment she finally stopped shrinking herself, the receipts out on the table justice. Let me know in the comments which line made your jaw drop. And if you want more stories like this one, make sure you're subscribed, because there's a lot more where this came from.